Hi, welcome. This is Psychology Today, and I'm your host, Wayne Hathaway. We're here today with Jeanette Kloos from Friends of the Historic Columbia River Highway. Welcome, Jeanette.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. You've been here before, and so I thank you for returning. Well, actually, I want to start with a little background.
Okay.
Some people that are watching might not have been here when you were here before. So can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
I am the president of Friends of the Historic Columbia River Highway, and I've been working on the historic highway for 30 years now. I started in 1987 with, I was with Oregon Department of Transportation, and I was asked to help do the study of the historic highway that was required by the Columbia River Gorge National Scenic Area Act. And that was just supposed to be a 6-month special assignment. But 30 years later, I'm still working on the highway. And I retired in 2006, and then I created the Friends of the Historic Columbia River Highway, and I continue to be the president.
Very good. Thank you for that. So from the last time that you were here, I think so I've read up a little bit. I was on the website, and I was looking at something called reconnecting and restoration, and I think you talked or shared a little bit about that last time. So I wanted to find out a little bit more about that.
The mantra is remember, restore, reconnect.
Yeah.
So the remember is remembering the history of the highway. Since it's now 102 years old, there's a lot of history there. Reconnect, restoring the parts of the highway that are open to motor vehicle traffic, and reconnecting those pieces of the highway with the segments that were lost when Interstate 84 was built, and then reconnecting those with the hiking and biking path. So now there's 17 miles of path built. There's about 3 miles that are under construction right now, and 5 miles still to go. So right now they're working on the section between Wyeth and Lindsay Creek, and that section is getting rid of the worst connection that we had going around Shell Rock Mountain. It had a very narrow shoulder, about 4 feet wide, and part of it had been had a rumble strip, so it made it even narrower. Big concrete metal wall on one side, and semis going 65 miles an hour on the other side. And now, once this project is built, next summer, you'll be able to be up on top of the bin wall, above and looking over the trucks and seeing the river and being farther away from the traffic.
Okay. And
it also connects a nice section of the old highway that was back in the woods. It was referred to as the Mossy Road. So it was a nice full canopy of trees. So that will be a very nice section when it's open. And once that's open, you'll be able to ride a bike either on the highway that's open to traffic or on the trail all the way from Troutdale to Viento.
Okay.
So the part that is not yet built is between Viento and Hood River.
Okay. So as somebody that I've been in Oregon for a little over 20 years, and I didn't realize that this highway, I knew that it existed. I didn't realize how it was impacted. So was it completely I-84 that just started to shut down parts of the highway, or were there other things that affected?
The first change in the highway was actually Bonneville Dam.
Okay.
And building a Bonneville Dam, they had to remove the railroad, realign the railroad, and that realignment of the railroad caused the historic highway to need to be realigned. So the first section included the Tooth Rock Tunnel. So from Bonneville to Cascade Locks was the first section in the mid-30s, and they kept working piece by piece of having a 2-lane water grade route, and eventually after the interstate highway system was created, they expanded that from 2 lanes to 4 lanes. So there's always been the 2 sections from Troutdale to Ainsworth and from Mosier to the Dalles that have remained open to traffic. But that whole middle section between Ainsworth and Mosier was cut into pieces.
Okay. Okay. Well, I had another question, but I don't remember what it was, so I'm not going to. So I want to get into. So last summer, there was a fire, and I think most people know about it. Can you talk a little, probably more than a little, about share about the damage that was done, and also when you're doing that, we'll display some of what you're talking about.
Sure.
So.
The fire was almost 50,000 acres, and it extended from just west of Bridal Veil to Hood River, and they have been able to reopen some things. The first thing that they worked to get reopened was the interstate, and it was closed for longer than it's ever been closed, even for snowstorms and ice storms. But the fire burned in a mosaic. There's parts of it that there's nothing, it's all black. The trees are totally burned. There's other parts that are brown where the trees may come back, and there's other parts that are green. And those green parts will help reseed all of the other areas. But the trees that were close to the interstate or the historic highway that were hazardous, that had the potential to fall and block the road, they needed to go in and actually cut down those trees. And then they've cut down well over 5,000 trees. So it's pretty major. And there are areas where you can now see things that you could never see before because there was always lots of trees.
Right.
One of those was above Tooth Rock Tunnel, part of the historic highway. There's a concrete wall that I didn't even know existed. I thought it was a rock wall, but now I can see it's concrete. There's been quite a partnership of agencies and private groups that have been working to try to reopen and restore the highway, the trails, and all of the hiking trails throughout the gorge. Right now, the historic Clear Highway is open from Troutdale to Bridal Veil.
Okay.
It is closed from Bridal Veil to Ainsworth, and the Historic Highway State Trail is closed from Ainsworth to Cascade Locks.
So here's the picture.
And on this map, everything that has a red dot is closed. So you can see that much of the western part of Oregon in the gorge is currently closed. But you also notice that the north side, Washington, is open. And if you go to east of Hood River, that area is open. So the Historic River Highway State Trail from Hood River to Mosier, the nice 6.5 mile route there, is open, including the Mosier Twin Tunnels. And there are a lot of other hiking trails on the Washington side and the east side of Hood River that are open. So there are still ways to go out and enjoy the gorge, but the section between Bridal Veil and Cascade Locks is not open. They are working on trying to get things open. After working on the problem of burned out trees falling on the road, they have the problem of rocks that used to be held in place by underbrush and moss are now loose and falling. And I've seen one picture of the area near Multnomah Falls where the rocks had totally covered the eastbound lanes. It was all the way to the center line. And they go through on a daily basis and try to keep it open to allow the restoration work on the highway. But they, Oregon Department of Transportation has determined that they really need some rockfall fences to make it safe for the historic highway to reopen in that area. And that work is going to take another 3 or 4 months. So maybe September, the section of the highway between Bridalveil and Ainsworth will reopen, maybe.
Maybe.
And part of the complication is they don't want to open the highway if the trails that the highway would provide access to can't be opened. And some of the trails are in much worse shape. There's a coalition of Trail Keepers of Oregon, Washington Trails Association, Pacific Crest Trails Association, and Friends of the Gorge that have formed teams, and they're going out on several times a week with crews to work on the trails. But some of the areas are still so dangerous Forest Service hasn't even assessed how bad it is, what needs to be done. Last week they did the first assessment on Eagle Creek, and they couldn't even get all 3 miles in. They did discover that one of the bridges is gone, but another bridge was okay, and lots of rockfall.
Do you get, when you're going out to try to do these repair efforts, do you get a lot of volunteers involved? Is this something that...
Yes, the 4 agencies have had well over 1,000 people asked to help. The issue there is that they need to have people that are very well trained and know what the hazards are, and even more so, they need to have crew chiefs that are well trained and know what they're doing to be able to lead the groups. So they've been having work parties in areas outside of the burn to teach people how to do the trail work.
So I know on the trails, you actually shared a photo, and maybe we can put it up there, of one of the fires in the tunnel, which is pretty dramatic.
Oneonta Tunnel is in the section that is still closed. The fire burned all of the timber lining. Luckily, the timber lining was aesthetic. It was what it looked like originally, but the structural part of the tunnel is shotcrete, mine bolts and mine straps and rock bolts. Unfortunately, there's so much rockfall at either end that they haven't been able to have an inspector go in to figure out whether the heat of the fire from the timbers damaged the shotcrete.
Okay.
They are planning to send a drone through just to get some idea of what it looks like inside, so they can start looking at what needs to be done to be able to bring it back.
Okay.
So that's another part that's going to be a long time before it's reopened. They haven't even figured out what is needed yet.
Yeah. I mean, I have a lot of friends that shared. This was even personally, it was pretty discouraging because we like to go up to that area to see that kind of damage occur. So yeah. Did you want to anything else on the fire? Like, well, let me say one other thing. What is really encouraging, which I didn't realize without looking, that there are areas that are still open, that
Yes.
you can go up there and hike. That it sounds like there's even areas that you can ride on that are open.
Yes.
Okay.
But Hood River to Mosier is the big one.
Yeah.
That's open. And there is progress being made. Forest Service is working on the Multnomah Falls Trail. There was a small wooden bridge between the lodge and the concrete footbridge that burned. So they are replacing that, and they hope in another couple months that you'll be able to walk up to the footbridge. But between the footbridge and the top of the falls, I've read that 90% of the trail is covered with rock, some of it 3 feet deep. And you can't just push the rock off the side because there's another switch back below. So that's a lot of rock to move to be able to reopen the trail to the top of the falls.
So how about like people that are watching this? How would you encourage people to get involved with the efforts for repair?
If you want to actually work on the trails, the Trail Keepers of Oregon website would be a good place to volunteer. The Friends of the Gorge is also working on the Trail Ambassador program, which is having people at different trailheads informing them of what's open and what's closed, but also giving information about trail stewardship. That you're not supposed to be cutting cutting across switchbacks, and the boot brushes are very important to keep the invasive plant seeds out. And there are also work parties that are specifically going in to remove invasive plants. So that's another alternative.
So I saw the work parties. I think they go from. I saw from June out to September.
The Friends of the Historic Clean River Highway has 4 work parties that are specifically on the Historic Highway State Trail. All these other organizations have many, many more work parties, but the 2 that are on the eastern end of the Historic Highway State Trail, we're going to be painting the wooden guardrail that is white. Some of it's been there almost 20 years, and it's looking its age. And we spent several other work parties just cleaning it with soap and water, and it was amazing how much better it looked once it had just a little bit of elbow grease and soap and water. Okay.
Well, thanks for sharing that. So let's go. I gotta cheat a little bit here. So we talked about community support. Let's go to some of the other projects coming up for the year. I know that you shared one when we had an exchange actually just before this on the wayfinding. Can you share a little bit about that project?
Yes, the Friends of the Historic Clean River Highway has a project that is wayfinding signs along the Historic Clean River Highway. We, in partnership with Oregon Department of Transportation and Oregon Parks and Recreation Department, put in a recreational trails program grant proposal, and we were successful in getting that. And there has been long been a need to have additional signs so that when you come up to a interchange from one direction, you figure out where the trail goes on the other side. Mm-hmm. And that wasn't needed when we first built the trail because it was only on one section. But now that we have different ones that connect, we need to have more information about how you get from one side to the other. And at the trailheads, providing information, if we have the graphic, it starts with the overview, which is all of the historic highway. So you know what parts are open to motor vehicle traffic, what parts are open to hiking and biking only, and which are future trail sections. And then it takes a section of that and blows it up and says, you are here. If you go a mile this way, there's this park that has these amenities. If you go 2 miles this way, there's another recreational site that has other amenities. And it also includes the mileages and the elevation for the section. So all of that information will be at 5 different trailheads, John B. Yawn, Tooth Rock, Bridge of the Gods, Senator Marco Hatfield West Trailhead, and Senator Marco Hatfield East Trailhead. So there'll be a lot more information out there for people that haven't been out there before to know where to go and what to see.
Very good. When do you expect a lot of these to start going up?
August.
In August, okay. All right. Let's go. We're going to do a quick video break, and then we'll be back with more.
Great,
All right.
thanks.
Bike safe, bike smart. Hi, my name is Xander.
And my name's Elizabeth.
Over the next few minutes, we're gonna have some fun and talk about some pretty important stuff.
Some of it you've heard before, but it never hurts to hear it again.
And again,
And again. So here we go. Did you know that just falling off your bike is enough to get a serious brain injury? So play it safe. Wear your helmet every time you ride. It can reduce the risk of head injury by up to 85%.
and that's a lot. The helmet should be snug on your head and sit flat. The strap should form a V under your ear, and the chin strap should also be snug. 2 fingers should fit in between your eyebrow and your helmet.
Also, make sure your helmet meets safety standards. Look for a sticker that says CPSC. This stands for the Consumer Product Safety Commission.
All the stuff we talked about today is common sense.
But you still need to think. Be courteous and be predictable by always riding in a straight line.
Wear a helmet. And follow the rules of the road. Ride with traffic on the right side of the road. Ride single file.
Obey traffic lights and traffic signs. Check behind you before turning. Use proper hand signals.
Stop, look left, right, then left again before entering a street. And use caution at an intersection.
Make eye contact with other drivers. Be careful around parked cars and watch for objects in your path.
And at night, be seen to be safe.
Never assume that motorists or pedestrians will see you. Remember, bikes are smaller than cars, and if there's a crash between the two, any guesses who will win?
That's all the time we have. So remember these 4 words. Bike safe, bike smart.
All right, thank you. We're back with Jeanette Kloos. So let's talk a little bit about the Gorge Ride. That's coming up in June. Can you share a little bit about the ride itself, the event, describe the route and those sorts of things?
It's our 12th annual Gorge Ride. It's the major fundraiser for the Friends of the Historic Columbia River Highway. We start at the Gorge Discovery Center in the Dalles. And the first section is along the Historic River Highway that is open to motor vehicle traffic, but has very light traffic from the Dalles to Mosier. And that section includes the Rowena Crest, which is a lovely promontory, very similar to Crown Point, that has Vista House on it, but without the building. So one of the things that the Gorge Ride provides is a water stop and porta potty at that location. We also stop at Mayordale, which is a historic, well over 100-year-old house with lots of trees surrounded by cherry orchards and vineyards, and it has lots of trees and grass, and so it's a lovely rest stop. So we provide food, water, and porta potties there. And then go on to the Historic River Highway State Trail between Hood River and Mosier. And that includes the Mosier Twin Tunnels, which is another highlight of the route. It's an out and back, so it's 38.5 miles round trip, and we've had a lot of different people ride. We usually have about 400 people ride, and we've had some with trailers, and one of the pictures we have is of a triple with a trailer, so
Okay.
3 people and then a trailer, and they made the whole route. The route is open all the time, but basically there's no water or restrooms outside of the ride. There's a restroom with water at the West Trail, which is the turnaround point.
Okay.
There is a vault toilet at the East Trailhead, but then there's no water or restroom facilities from Mosier into the Dalles. So that and the food and the SAG are what we are providing. As well as we, at the West Trailhead, we have information about the Historic River Highway and the Friends of the Historic River Highway, so that people know why the highway is important and why they should be supporting the restoration and reconnection.
And as far as registering for the ride, it's on the website, right? Is that?
It's Eventbrite. We go through Eventbrite to have the registrations, and we keep it open until the Monday before. If you want to purchase a jersey, high-tech T-shirt, I should say, or a lunch, you need to be. The deadlines for those were a little bit earlier.
Okay.
And we know that most people procrastinate.
Huh.
So the last week we get all sorts of people signing up. But we had an email blast last week that went to 3,000 people, and there have been 2 or 3 a day signing up. So we
that's
are
good.
getting more. We have over 100 already signed up.
And this benefits the.
Yes.
Okay.
It is our major fundraiser for the Friends of the Highway.
Do you get, and the people that support the ride, is that all volunteerism along
Yes.
the ride? Okay.
All of the people that are at the rest stops and the registration are all volunteers. And we do have sponsors that give us different things. Coffee, Subway is giving us cookies, organically grown, gives us some organically grown fruit.
Mm-hmm.
And Multnomah Falls Lodge has given us a monetary donation, as has Port of Hood River. So we get support from the community, and we have mechanics at 3 different locations, and they are from the local bike shops, and they are volunteering also.
Okay. Great. It sounds like a fun ride.
It is. There is a 3-mile long 5% grade to get up to Rowena Crest.
Well, now you're speaking my language. I like a little challenge.
It's not steep, but it's long, and you have to just keep cranking.
Yeah, that's great. Okay. I know that it's not the only event. Well, actually, let me step back. I want to talk a little bit about the bike hubs. Can you tell us about the bike hubs?
Sure. Those are something that the different cities along the way have been working on. So it's the city of Wood Village, Troutdale, Cascade Locks, Hood River, Mosier, and the Dalles. Each one is going to be a little bit different based on what they already had available, what space they have available. But the sites already have a bike fix-it station now. And there are additional bike fix-it stations that are going out in some of the state parks. So there will be many more opportunities to fix a problem if you already have the technical knowledge on how to fix it. The tools will be there. Some of the bike hubs will have restrooms and interpretive signage, and I think at least one was hoping to have electrical plug-ins to be able to recharge your phone, and each one is in a different stage of development. For Wood Village, they had an existing park with a building and parking, so they were just adding a few bike amenities. At the other end, Mosier had a small piece of property, and they've been working really hard to try to find funds to do all of the things they would like to do, but so far there's a fix-it station.
Very neat. Okay, so now let's talk a little bit about some of the other events. I noticed that there's a antique car show. Can you share just a little bit about what that event's like?
Sure. We asked the antique car clubs if they will ferry passengers from the Western Antique Aeroplane and Automobile Museum in Hood River, WAM, through the Mosier Twin Tunnels to Rowena Crest and back. We've done this 8 years already. Actually, Oregon Parks and Recreation Department asked us to do it on a regular basis, so it's every year, the second Saturday in July, so that when people show up at the West Trailhead and say, I can't walk far enough to go see the tunnels, but I'd like to experience them. So they have an opportunity to sign up to be a passenger in one of the antique cars. And the Historical Highway Advisory Committee and State Parks has determined that in this particular case, antique car means 1949 and older.
Okay.
1949 was when the Mosier Twin Tunnels were changed to be one-way because the cars were getting so much bigger they couldn't have two-way traffic in the tunnels anymore. So we've had some of the antique car tours have been bigger than others. For the Historic Highway Centennial, we went all the way from Troutdale to the Dalles, and we had 80 cars. And that was a lot of fun, stopping at different places and having people come and take pictures of all the old cars and talk to the owners about what their car was like and what age it was and that kind of thing. The last couple of years it's been smaller, like 10 or 15 cars.
Okay.
But we would definitely encourage anybody that has an old car. We would love to have more participants.
So 1949 and older?
1949
Okay.
and older.
Okay.
So we have quite a few from the Horseless Carriage Club of America, Portland Regional Group. They're quite supportive, and they usually have a couple. And sometimes we have some cars from WAM. WAM is both cars and airplanes. And one of the things that's unique about their museum is that everything in the museum is operationable. You can take it out, fly it, or drive on the road. Everything works.
Neat.
And in addition to the Friends of the Highway tour, WAM has a traffic jam that same day. They have a bunch of other cars, some of which are younger than the ones that we can take, on display, and they do some contests and just have a good time for Saturday. Actually, it starts on Friday with some movies in the backyard. So,
Outside?
Outside.
Oh, very neat. That sounds like fun. So now I want to really have a conversation. During our break, I talked to you about so Friends of the Historic Columbia River Highway. It's a movement, and it's one that's new to me. But I think that sharing and having a conversation about why it's important to the community and how it's important to us, the why behind it.
Yeah.
So,
from a historic standpoint, the historic Columbia River Highway was the first scenic highway in the country, which means it was the first highway that was specifically designed to, as Samuel Lancaster, the designer, said, to first find all the beauty spots and take people to them. But it was also what later became known as Lay Lightly on the Land, the National Park Service philosophy. So they wanted to build it disturbing as little as possible and still getting people to the amazing locations like Vista House, Crown Point, and Multnomah Falls and the other waterfalls. So that's why much of the highway that is still in good condition is not only on the National Register of Historic Places, but it's also a National Historic Landmark. And only 2 or 3% of the sites that are National Register have enough both historic importance and enough integrity that they can become National Historic Landmarks.
okay.
So that's the history part of it. When we started working on the Historic Columbia Highway State Trail, there was a lot of skepticism that that it was going to ever happen, for one thing, because we didn't have any money, but also that it was going to help the local communities. When Hood River to Mosier was built, Mosier immediately saw that having these bicyclists come by the front door of their shops was helping the community. They were able to have a new shop come in, a new restaurant come in, and it helped the economy of the town a lot. Similarly, when the trail got all the way to Cascade Locks, they could see that the bicyclists came into town, drove by the stores, while all the people on the freeway went by and didn't come into town at all. So they saw it as a very much a economic benefit for the local communities. And now the mayors and of the different towns are very supportive of reconnecting all of the pieces so that it will eventually become a world-class facility that you would be not just going for a day trip, but be going for several days and seeing different parts and staying in the different communities along the way, like the European hut-to-hut kind of experience.
I understand. So part of this is just engagement with so I was listening to what you were saying, getting the bikers out on the road has made a difference. That's how the communities, it sounds like they're more aware that the benefit.
Yes.
With the recent fire, have you seen, or has anybody really measured it, if there's been like a lot less, or is it too early to tell because we haven't really gotten in the prime season for riding?
There are significant disruptions with the fire. The Cascade Locks was closed for more than a week, and it came at what was one of their busiest times, Labor Day weekend, and they're still recovering. They're trying to promote themselves, and Cascade Locks strong. Give back to the gorge. There's another place that is definitely hurting is Multnomah Falls, because the freeway parking lot gets full, and without having the other option of going on the historic highway to get to the falls, once the freeway parking lot is full, nobody else can go see it.
Yeah.
To alleviate that, Oregon Department of Transportation has instituted the Columbia Gorge Express. Right now it is working on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, shuttling people from Rooster Rock to Multnomah Falls and back. In June, that will expand to be 7 days a week and going from Gateway to Rooster Rock to Multnomah Falls to Cascade Locks and to Hood River and back. So it'll provide another way to go and see these locations and access the area that you in a way that is not using a private car. So it's an experiment, but it worked really well the last couple years, just on the weekends. But they realized with the fire that they needed to have more capacity, more buses, because Rooster Rock to Multnomah Falls is the only way you can get there right now.
When did, you told me this before we started the show, Friends of the Historic Columbia Highway start. When was that?
2006.
2006.
When I retired.
Okay. And have you ever seen an impact as significant as you just saw?
Oh, no.
No, this has been the biggest one.
Even 1991, when the Falls Fire happened, the road was only closed when there were actually flames out there. So having it closed for it's going to be almost a year is totally unprecedented. And having the freeway closed as long as it was unprecedented. The number of trees that they're cutting down is unprecedented. The amount of rockfall mitigation that they need to do it's just something they've never had to do before.
Have you seen, out of the local people there in the community, have you seen a lot of outreach as a result of or even more awareness that the Friends actually is there, or has it been steady or none at all?
There's been a lot of information specifically about the fire, and that's gone through many different organizations. There have been quite a few different meetings where they were discussing what the effects of the fire have been. One meeting in particular was talking about, well, this is a fire ecology out here. It's used to having a fire every 100 years or so. And some of the plants need fire to grow. And it is good to have the clearings in the that will get different plants growing. One thing I heard recently was that when they went out on a trail project, what used to be all sorts of shrubs, now it's trilliums. The trilliums were under there all the time. You just couldn't see them.
That's cool.
So, and there's lots of ferns growing. So there's a lot of efforts going into restoring, reopening the trails, working at getting the environmental messages out of that the fire's not all a bad thing. Yes, it has real impacts, but there's some good stuff. But also that there's things that need to be done to make sure that we don't bring in a whole bunch of invasive plants that they're invasive because they take over, and they keep out the good native plants that are needed. So all of those messages are things that different groups have been working on. They're not particularly Friends of the Historic Clear Highway messages, but it's things that are important to the overall community and learning about the fire itself and what it did.
Let's do a quick video break, and then we'll come back for the conclusion here. Okay, so that was good.
Bike safe, bike smart. Hi, my name is Alexander.
And my name's Elizabeth.
Over the next few minutes, we're gonna have some fun and talk about some pretty important stuff.
Some of it you've heard before, but it never hurts to hear it again.
And again,
And again. So here we go. Did you know that bikes are considered vehicles?
meaning you have to follow the same rules as someone driving a car.
And why do we have rules?
To keep us safe and to keep things moving smoothly.
That means when you ride in the street, ride in a straight line with traffic on the right side of the road. Riding against traffic is dangerous. It puts you where the driver of a car isn't expecting you.
Meaning he might turn in front of you, or worse, into you.
And you know what that means.
Ouch.
And if you're riding with friends, always ride single file. And here's something else to remember. Always obey traffic lights and signs, and pay attention to lane markings.
When you see one of these, stop. When you see one of these, yield. Traffic might be coming from one side or the other.
Now, since your bike doesn't come with turn signals,
Use your hands.
but always check for traffic before you turn. Do this to turn left, this to turn right. Also, some states allow you to do this to turn right, and do this to stop.
Did you know that 70% of car-bicycle crashes happen at driveways or intersections?
So before you enter a street, stop, look left, right, then left again. And use caution at intersections. Be careful. Don't be a statistic.
Hey, now a word about staying alert.
If you're riding your bike, Alexander,
Hey,
if you're riding your bike, leave your headphones at home or stick them in a backpack. Because if you put them on your head, you won't be able to hear the traffic around you.
bike safe, bike smart.
All right, we're back for the conclusion here. So you've been involved with this for a long time. Can you just share, like, what drew you to doing this?
A lot of it is that it took so many of the different things that I'm interested in and put them all together. I'm very much interested in history. I have been interested in bicycles as a form of transportation for a long time. Back in 1981, I helped write the first AASHTO guide for planning of bicycle facilities. So, and I also like to ride a bike. And I enjoy nature, being outdoors, and taking pictures of lovely locations. And this puts all of those together, history, biking, and photography. So, and there's always something new out there. Last Friday, we were tromping through the woods, looking for pieces of the highway and looking at what was going to be proposed for the next section of trail. And we saw waterfalls, we saw flowers, saw a whole bunch of poison oak.
Oh, yeah.
So it was nice to see that another section is in the planning stages. It's not funded yet, but they're working on trying to figure out how to connect the next pieces.
Very good.
And one piece that is funded for the Historic Highway State Trail is Mitchell Point. They've been doing an alternatives analysis for that. And later this month, we will find out what the geotechs and other people think are still viable alternatives. I'm looking forward to hearing that, and sure hoping that there are some alternatives that are still viable.
Very good. Thanks for sharing that. So let's talk about getting people involved, because you can't do this on your own.
No, I cannot do it on my own. The Friends of the Historic Clear Highway is an all-volunteer organization. Currently we have 6 members on the board. We would love to have more board members. As we talked earlier, we do work parties out there. One of the things that volunteers help with is that we have the display about the Historic Highway at all of the Edgefield concerts. So there are several volunteers that just love all sorts of different kinds of music, and you get in for free. Okay. And we still need a couple of additional volunteers for the Gorge Ride, for the registration and parking at the beginning. So if you volunteer to help with that portion of the Gorge Ride, you get to ride for free.
Oh, that's a good benefit. So where would you funnel people if they want to look into the different opportunities for volunteering?
Our website is hcrh.org, and there is a volunteer page within that website that talks about different opportunities and different events that we have. So that's the main location for information. Or they can email me at fhcrh@comcast.net.
Okay, that's good. What else would you share about? We have a little more time, so we got 5 minutes.
Well, the Historic Highway is special because of the Columbia River Gorge is special. And it was created with first huge flows of lava coming from eastern Oregon, and then the Ice Age floods. The glacial Lake Missoula formed many times with an ice dam, and then the ice dam broke and walls of water would come down the Columbia River 65 miles an hour, 700 feet deep. And so the geology of the gorge is just really interesting. That's what we created all of the waterfalls, because the floods took off the topsoil and left the creeks hanging over the edge of the basalt. So there's always more interesting things to learn about.
We're like a lot of the resources to like look into that history. I mean, there's plenty. You have
Yes.
the internet. Are there places that you would suggest people go if they're interested in learning more of the history of that?
Oh, there's so many different books. Specifically for the Historic Clear Highway, for the centennial, Peg Willis wrote a book that is titled The Columbia River Highway. They said it couldn't be done. And it's a very easy read with lots of good information about the history of the highway and description of the highway. So she's a good author.
Very good. Well, we are going to wrap it up. So I thank you very much for joining.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it. That was a lot of good information. So this is Psychology Today. Keep. It looks like I'm supposed to stretch it out a little bit longer. I'm getting the nod from the booth. Oh man, you know what I just want to share with you, because when I knew I was going to be here hosting with you on, the fire was the thing that I just knew it was prominent for me, and what you shared about regarding it's part of the natural habitat, it's necessary, and some of the good things that that you see now that you didn't see before, that helps, because that even for me, I shared earlier in the show, I have a lot of friends that were discouraged by that. There's hope, and it's
Yes.
open, and people should go, and so I just really want to thank you for that.
And before you go out, one of the websites to check is Ready, Set, Gorge. It has information like the map we showed, and it will be updated of when things open, what is open. It has information, links for the shuttle bus, and list of different trails that are open. So there's a lot of good information on that website.
Okay. And any other resources or websites people should be directed to? Or
Friends of the Gorge has a lot of information on different work parties and trail
people
trail
from
plans.
Got it. So we're ending now. So thank you very much, Jeanette. And thanks for coming on. This is Psychology Today. And we're done. Thanks for the people in the booth, too.